You're bound to spot at least one of those bees that just keep buzzing around outside every day. You know, that tiny little creature that's constantly scanning and examining the same flowers, fluttering its wings with the same rhythm. It's still there that afternoon too, until evening. Then a moment comes, and as the sun sinks lower, the bee disappears, the hive grows quiet, and the garden falls still. Maybe you don't even wonder about it at that moment. Where did it actually go? Or what is it doing right now? When we close our eyes, we drift off to the world of sleep. But as you lie in your bed tonight, thousands of bees inside the hive in your garden will be keeping watch within a meticulous and delicate order. Tonight, a single worker bee will hang motionless on a flower, as if frozen, its legs locked onto the leaf, its antennae drooping, its eyes open. Tonight, the temperature inside the hive will be exactly 35 degrees because there's someone regulating it, and you'll drift into a deep sleep without knowing any of this. Welcome back to the Bees Around Us channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. In fact, this channel isn't just about an insect, it's about a system that's been in place for millions of years. I want you to stay until the very end, because the final topic I'll cover will surprise you. What are bees' brains really doing while they sleep? Are they working? How does this process work? And this might just change the way we understand human sleep. If you're ready, let's jump into the video with our first point. 1. Bees really do sleep, but not in the way we might imagine. This might surprise you, because bees don't have eyelids and can't close their eyes. So how do researchers know whether they're sleeping or not? They've determined this through their behavior. At certain times, some bees become completely motionless. Their antennae, which normally tremble constantly, droop, almost touching the ground. Their muscles relax, their legs lock onto a surface, and they become silent. When stimulated, they react much more slowly than an awake bee. In other words, this is a classic sign of sleep that researchers are well acquainted with. In subsequent years, brain activity measurements were also conducted. Electrical readings showed distinct changes during sleep. The bee wasn't merely entering a standby mode, it was actively transitioning into a different physiological state. In other words, sleep is a biological necessity for bees as well. But of course, not all roles are the same. Young workers sleep in short, intermittent bursts. Feeding or warming the hive may be required at any moment. Older workers, that is, those that forage, can get up to 8 hours of sleep a day, according to research. It may seem surprising, but it's true. The queen bee, on the other hand, is one of the individuals that rests the longest. Naturally, she needs this energy to produce thousands of eggs. Additionally, the seasons also determine sleep duration. In winter, the colony slows down and individual sleep duration increases. If there is artificial light, vibration, or noise throughout the night, we may be disrupting the bees' sleep cycles. Bees are extremely light-sensitive creatures, and these seemingly harmless factors can, in the long run, become elements that erode the colony's functioning. The hive grows quiet. The outside world stands still. Right in the midst of this darkness, life continues in its most subtle form. 2. We can uncover surprisingly diverse patterns and meanings from their sleeping positions. In fact, where a bee sleeps is by no means a coincidence. It reveals a great deal about its age, its role in the hive, and even the decisions it made that night. Young worker bees sleep right in the center of the hive, among the tightly packed cells of the comb. Sometimes they lean against one another. In fact, this isn't a matter of preference. It's a strategy. The center is where the larvae and eggs are housed. The young workers' duties require them to be there anyway. This minimizes the distance between their sleep and their tasks. As for the older workers, they move even further to the edges. They prefer to rest behind the honeycomb cells, near the hive walls. Foragers are individuals who know the outside world, have memorized landmarks, and recognize danger. No one has ordered this arrangement. It is a settlement pattern that develops naturally with age. We could also call it life experience and wisdom. Now, moving on to the most interesting position. There are also bees that sleep alone outside. A forager that has gone out to the field sometimes cannot return home. It may have gotten dark, the distance was too great, or the wind may have blown her off course. That bee must find a place on her own for the night. A leaf, the inside of a flower. She locks her legs onto the surface and remains in that position until morning. A creature no bigger than a tiny coin hangs suspended on a leaf in the middle of the night. And it doesn't fall. That's because bees have a passive locking mechanism in their legs. It requires no muscle strength. The tighter it gets, the more firmly it holds on. When the morning sun comes out, it warms up, wakes up, and returns to its hive. If you see bees hanging motionless at the hive's entrance or on its outer wall, they are generally not in danger. They are likely older workers who have found a safe resting spot and are waiting for morning. No intervention is necessary. Just observing them is enough. 3. Brain activity continues even during sleep, and this is largely linked to learning. This is where things get really interesting. Of course, a bee's brain doesn't simply shut down when it sleeps. Electrical activity changes during sleep, but it doesn't stop. Patterns emerge that are distinctly different from those during wakefulness. The bee doesn't enter a passive standby mode. Something is happening inside. Here's the thing. Bees are master navigators. They can travel kilometers away from their hive and return, landing at the exact same spot. But this knowledge doesn't just appear instantly. It's learned. Every new route, every new flower location is processed by the nervous system, and a consolidation process is required for it to take hold. Additionally, researchers have observed that bees remember the routes they've learned better after sleeping. Bees deprived of sleep, however, cannot demonstrate this performance. When sleep is removed, learning is impaired. Of course, let's also address the issue of the dance. The waggle dance, through which bees communicate the location of a nectar source to their hive mates, encodes direction and distance. An error of just a few degrees can result in a deviation of hundreds of meters. Angular errors in the dance of sleep-deprived bees increase significantly. That bee is dancing the wrong way, and the dozens of bees following it are heading to the wrong place. A single bee's sleep determines the route of hundreds of bees. Of course, there's also this: if there's light, noise, or vibration. Throughout the night, the bee's ability to process what they've learned may be disrupted. This is an invisible loss. You don't see dead bees, and you don't see sick bees. But the colony is quietly becoming less productive. The hive learns best in the dark, in silence, on a calm night. 4. The hive's heating system continues to operate while the hive sleeps. This is perhaps one of the most striking details of their organization. Here's the situation. A hive maintains its internal temperature between 34 and 36 degrees throughout the night, even in winter. This figure remains constant. Eggs, larvae, and pupae depend on this temperature. Even a 1-degree drop can disrupt their development. And this temperature doesn't arise on its own. I'd especially like to point out here that bees generate heat by vibrating. They do this without moving their flight muscles, simply by vibrating. Their wings don't open, their bodies don't move, but their muscles are working. An observer might think that bee is sleeping. In reality, that bee is a heater. In addition, throughout the night, certain individuals take over this task. While the entire hive rests, a group of bees generates heat through muscle tremors. They expend as much energy as a person who has run a marathon, yet they appear motionless. In fact, this task isn't distributed randomly. Young worker bees, that is, those already in the center, close to the larvae, primarily take on this heating task. Their age and position make them natural heaters. Here too, no one gives orders. The system establishes this distribution on its own. Consequently, on extremely hot nights, the situation is reversed. The hive must cool down. This time, the bees use their wings like fans to create air circulation. Bees lined up at the hive entrance blow air outward, while those inside blow it inward. It's like a breath in and out, all night long. Sleep and duty intertwine. Here's the thing. This is the clearest indication that the hive is a living organism. An individual can sleep. A colony cannot. In fact, if you see bees fluttering their wings in a cluster in front of the hive entrance on hot summer nights, don't panic. The hive is ventilating itself. This is a normal reflex of a healthy colony. In winter, however, avoid opening the hive unnecessarily. Every time you open it, the accumulated heat escapes, and the bees are forced to expend extra energy to regain that heat. 5. Sleep deprivation can cripple the bees' navigational abilities. I'd like to start with this fact. Now we're getting to the most significant finding. Of course, what happens when bees are deprived of sleep? To understand this, we first need to know that a bee colony isn't made up of individuals, but of decisions: which flower to visit, which route to take. All these decisions are based on information, and that information is conveyed through dance. In particular, the waggle dance is the most complex communication system in the world of bees. When a worker bee finds a new nectar source, she returns to the hive and dances. The angle of the dance indicates the direction, the duration encodes the distance, and the intensity indicates the quality of the source. Other bees in the hive watch this dance and fly to that location. It's a navigation system that's millions of years old. Sleep deprivation disrupts exactly this system. To give an example, studies show that sleep-deprived bees make significant errors in their dance angles. A deviation of just a few degrees translates to a misdirection of hundreds of meters in the field. Distance information is lost, and the quality signal weakens. Dozens of bees acting on that flawed information end up in the wrong place, return empty-handed, and waste energy. But of course, it doesn't end there. The colonies compare reports from different sources and engage in a sort of voting process. The most convincing and accurate dance wins out. The dance of a sleep-deprived bee is so weak that it is eliminated early in this competition. In fact, here's another reality. A single bee's sleep can shape the colony's foraging decision for that day. Ultimately, a stressed colony, one that has endured a harsh winter, battled disease, or faced food shortages, may produce individuals with disrupted sleep patterns. This manifests directly in foraging efficiency: less nectar, more erratic routes, and more exhausted bees. The vicious cycle operates silently. Here's the situation. If the hive is healthy, the bees sleep well. If the bees sleep well, the dance is accurate. If the dance is accurate, foraging is efficient. And the quietest link in this chain takes place at night, in the dark, inside the hive. As a result, we'll now return to the question: do bees sleep? The answer is yes, but this yes is far more nuanced than one might think. That worker bee you see in your garden in the morning may have spent the previous night on a leaf, all alone, braving the cold, waiting for dawn. Meanwhile, those inside the hive have been keeping watch, generating heat, and perhaps reinforcing what they've learned. While your thousands of neighbors may appear motionless, the colony has never stopped. Let's not forget this. The garden that seemed empty was actually full. The hive that seemed silent was bustling with activity. And you've been living right alongside all of this for years. Now you know. I'd like to end this video by asking, have you ever seen a bee hanging motionless on a leaf in your garden at night? If so, please share in the comments. Where was it? And what was it like? See you again in the next video.